Anything about politics. My name is Jarrett, and I am here to answer all of your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated, be they left wing or right wing. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the show where you can ask all of your questions about politics without any fear that you're going to get judged or roasted or yelled at or made fun of. This is not a debate show. I don't believe in debates. I don't think that they're productive. I know that there's a lot of very popular shows out there where Democrats and Republicans yell and scream at each other and call each other names and try to prove that one of them is right and one of them is wrong. This is not what we do here on this show. This show is about engaging in good faith on the substance and hoping to come to some sort of agreement about what is actually going on in our country and our government. What is up? Eliminate all foids. To everybody else, welcome. You are all welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. I do not judge people based on their political beliefs. You can be MAGA, you can be libertarian, you can be whatever you like. And so long as you're asking a question in good faith, then you are welcome here. I'm not here to harass anybody or bully anybody. I am just here to engage in good faith on the substance. If you've ever wanted to ask a real life Democratic question, why are you guys like this? Why are you guys like that? Then you got a real life Democrat here to answer that for you. D. Scott, what's up? Good to see you again. What looks like a Earth Peace Earth says, is this one of these I Hate America podcasts? No, I don't hate America. Vickum says, opinion on Javier Milei. Don't know enough about him to opine. Sorry. Eliminate All Voices. Did you watch the Artemis 2 mission live? I did not. But it's exciting. I love space travel. I'm glad that we're doing it. The Craig Sham says, honestly, I've become uninterested in politics due to lefty and righty protests / content fatigue. I get that. There's a lot of people out there who are just trying to get lots of clicks and likes, just like fighting and casting aspersions. But I do think that it's really important that people keep abreast of politics, even if you don't engage in kind of like the elbow throwing left and right. But yeah, let's see here. Yeah, I am trying the Craigie sham. I am trying to be a different kind of political discourse where it's not like that. Like I'm hoping to be the kind of creator that people who are exhausted from watching people fight and argue will come here if they actually want to discuss issues and substance. And RC says, have we actually been told why we were attacking Iran? We've been told a bunch of different reasons. Some of them are contradictory, some of them are flat out lies. I think probably the closest thing to accurate that came out of this administration was Marco Rubio admitting that we got pressured into doing this by Israel. And there's really no substantive argument for America's interest in pursuing this war. Demand says, I can't support the Democratic Party. They have shown throughout the years they are war criminals. Demand, I don't really know if I would agree with that, particularly because the Republican Party does everything that you hate about the Democratic Party, only worse. So maybe instead of not supporting the Democratic Party, which is the best chance of dethroning the Republican Party, maybe you can vote in the primary for Democrats that have stronger stances towards sending money and weapons to Israel, and then voting for Democrats in the general. Let me know what you think about that demand. Ivan Cisco says, will Pam Bondi get paid after she got fired? Probably not. Trump doesn't like paying people. Eliminate all Floyd's opinion on accelerationism. I'm against it. If you are trying to hasten the downfall of America by throwing marginalized communities under the bus, like that just doesn't seem nice to those people. It's a very privileged position to have where you're like, well, I'll be safe, but maybe if we piss off those people enough, they'll start rioting and then we can have some real change. It's a nonsense position in my opinion. Demand says, Gavin recently said he stands by Israel and I don't stand by Republicans at all. All right. Well, if you are looking for the politicians that stand up to Israel, Demand, they're all in the Democratic Party. Like the Democratic Party is all, not all, but uniform is, I would say, more than half of the elected Democrats right now are voting against sending more money to more money and weapons to Israel. The Republican Party is is voting lockstep in sending money and weapons to Israel. So again, if there are politicians that you like within the Democratic Party, but they're not in your specific district or state, voting for the Democrat that you don't like will empower the Democrats that you do like. Like AOC and Bernie Sanders have committed to never voting on sending more money and weapons to Israel. And, you don't like Chuck Schumer or Gavin Newsom, but voting for those Democrats instead of letting a Republican win empowers AOC and Bernie Sanders to make that actual change that you like. Alrighty. Demand says Democratic Party have funded Israel too, though they stand by them. Let's be honest. Yeah, they have in the past, but they're not right now. Demand. Like, don't you think that that's important clarification to make? Like we can look at the past and try to predict the future, or we can look at what's going on right now. People always talk about using their vote to like punish the Democratic Party or whatever, but why don't we reward the Democratic Party with our vote for being the party that is voting against sending more money and weapons to Israel? Demand. Let me know what you think about that. Asia says, is that true? Did have the Democratic Party actually vote against sending weapons to Israel? Yes, half of the elected Democrats in the Senate. I don't know how many did in the House, but I know that there are at least some, Muzz King, Triska, and D. Scott, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. And ASEAN, if you want me to get an exact count for you on how many Democrats in the House have voted against sending money and weapons to Israel, I can get that for you. Just let me know. Tyler says there are groups in the Republican Party like Thomas Massie who's against Israel. Yeah, but there's only two Republicans who are actually voting against sending money to Israel. It's Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is no longer in the House. Unknown S says this obsession with Israel is exactly why liberals destroyed their party. That doesn't seem like a productive comment, and it also does not seem accurate. JC Huber says, I'm just wondering. Just wondering what? You got to finish that one. Victor Chillin says, odds the SAVE Act passes. I would say that there's very little chance that the SAVE Act passes. It's always possible, of course. Like, you'll never lose money betting on the Republican Party doing the wrong thing, but it does not seem like even the Republican Party is interested in passing the SAVE Act. Ms. Dolly, Triska, and Muzzking, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. All right, Joe Gugliuzza says Democrats are weak in all caps. That's an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked. I don't care if you have different political opinions than me, but actually ask a question, be part of the conversation. Bryson says, should we get rid of the two-party system? I'm down for that, but the only way to do that is with ranked choice voting, and you don't get ranked choice voting unless you vote for Democrats. All right, Walker McDaddy says, should Kanye West be president? No. R says, I'm going to be honest, Democrats will continue losing until they fully stop standing by Israel. You know that there are way more elected Democrats who are voting against sending money and weapons to Israel than Republicans, right? Like, it seems weird that we only care about politicians sending money and weapons to Israel when it's Democrats that are doing it, but when Republicans are doing it, y'all seem like that's fine. Like, we refuse to vote for Democrats, and instead we are going to allow the Republican Party to win elections so that they can continue sending money and weapons to Israel. But if you're looking for the politicians that are voting against sending more money and weapons to Israel, like, they're all in the Democratic Party. D. Scott, Muzzking, and Kim Buckman, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. We have hit the finger hearts, everybody. It is finger hearts o'clock. Best part of the day. Okay, let's see here. Thank you, Eliminate All Foids. Burning Desire for You says, where should the line be drawn between free speech and harmful speech? That is a really good question, Burning Desire. And honestly, it's a little over my head. Like, if we want to have like one of these very high-minded, ethereal conversations about where that line is drawn, I think it has something to do with like immediate harm or something. I don't know. Okay, Ben Egan says, who do you think will replace former Attorney General Pam Bondi? I mean, right now it's Attorney General, it's Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. I don't know if he's going to be the person who's officially nominated, though. Tyler B says, what can we do to make EVs more appealing to the general public? I think like charging stations, basically. Like, there's all this data about how much better the air quality is in cities where the majority of the population has transitioned to EVs. the technology that's going into EVs right now is unbelievable. Like we're talking about 500 mile range, 5-minute charging times. I mean, if we're talking about BYDs, like they're even better than that. Hopefully we can get them in America sometime soon. But yeah, where I think EVs are like a good stepping stone to progress, but we really need to start working towards having like more walkable cities and investing in public infrastructure. Okay, let's see here. Average Joe says, if you call me Average Joe, technically that's calling me a name. I suppose it's not a pejorative, it's your screen name, obviously. All right, Pyramidal says, why should Democrats stop sending money to Israel when we have sent money to Israel for years? I mean, just because we've done something in the past doesn't mean that we should continue doing it in the future, right, my guy? I mean, the short answer is that the current government of Israel is doing war crimes, and we already have a rule that says we're not allowed to send money and weapons to countries that are doing war crimes. Okay, Soft says Pan Bondi just got fired. I did see that. Tyler B says 13 mile per hour in my truck is getting old. LOL. Yeah, you should, at the very least, you should get a hybrid. Let's see here. Next Prime Minister of Poland asks Raz. I do not know anything about the politics of Poland. R says, what would you say to leftists who are against Democrats? I would say that you are not you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Like, I understand that you don't like certain people in the Democratic Party or even Democratic leadership, but the politicians that you like are all in the Democratic Party, and voting for better over worse is always better. Let me go back a second, because I've actually been thinking about this a little bit, where here's what, if you're a progressive, if you're like somebody on the left like myself who wants the Democratic Party to be further to the left, you have two jobs. Your first job is convincing people to vote for better Democrats in the primary. But your second job is that if your candidate of choice does not win the primary, your job is to vote for the centrist Democrat, because that centrist Democrat being in that seat, as opposed to a Republican, empowers the more leftist progressive Democrats that are in the government. So, if you don't like Chuck Schumer, I don't like Chuck Schumer, but it's better to have Chuck Schumer in that seat than a Republican, because having Chuck Schumer in that seat empowers people like Bernie Sanders and AOC. John Smith says the Republican Party has terrible morals and beliefs. I agree with that if we're talking about elected politicians. I do not believe in casting aspersions on voters. All right, John Abbott says, do you think Bondi will get the title co-special envoy for the Shield of America, or do you think Trump will make up some other fake thing to put her in charge of? Yeah, she'll be special envoy for begging me to not go to jail. Average Joe says, Brandenburg v. Ohio, a free speech violation requires three things. Is the harm intended? Is it likely to cause harm? And did it result in harm? Oh, that's interesting. All right, well, there's your answer. Someone says Democrats are Republican light now. That is inaccurate, someone. In fact, an argument could be made, and I believe that this is accurate, that the Democratic Party is more left-wing and progressive than it has been in decades, maybe since the 70s. Short says, do you think it's a coincidence that the first two cabinet members out are women? No, I do not. I also do not think it is a coincidence that in the military right now, they are halting or stopping or firing anybody who isn't a straight white man. Even where so far as the person who is in charge of the Department of Defense should really not be putting their fingers in promotions to one-star general. Like, that's bananas. Like, that doesn't happen. Burning Desire for You says, do you think Trump will bring out nuclear weapons during the war with Iran? I don't think so. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. CS17 says, is Bondi getting reassigned, or is she officially out? Not sure. American Venom says, how can we become knowledgeable in politics from an unbiased perspective? You want to have a diverse news diet, so check out news aggregators like Ground News or the Reddit news feed. You could also check out like a really short, unbiased news roundup podcast. Like, I think NPR has one, or the Associated Press has one. Let's see here. Braden P says, what are your thoughts on Trump? Corrupt, incompetent, obviously racist, You know, there aren't enough negative words in the dictionary for me to accurately describe Donald Trump. Someone says Democrats removed opposing capital punishment from policies. I don't know if that's true, someone, but even if they did, I don't agree with that. But they're still better than the Republican Party, which is not removing that from their platform, but actively pursuing the death penalty. Like, one of the things that Trump did in his final months in office was to accelerate the death penalty for certain people because he just really wanted to kill some extra people. Like, better is better and worse is worse, someone. Braden P says, "Can you tell me how he is racist?" Sure. He said, "I don't want black people counting my money. I want those guys, the Jews with the little hats, counting my money." People have reported that he does not like being seen in public with black people. Like, when he's doing events with the military and there's like black service members there, he says, like, "Don't put them next to me." In his casinos, he told people, like, get rid of all the black dealers on the floor. Like, I don't want to be seen with them. He was sued by the Justice Department for refusing to rent apartments to black people. Like, the dude's a racist. Alrighty, let's see here. Kelsey says Trump has suffered a lot of L's this week. That is accurate. Benny Bereskowitz says, remember when they were worried about death panels? Yeah, and that was all billionaire-funded propaganda. Let's see here. Barista Coffee says, Iranian come to American, you just waiting, dude. I don't know what that means. Let's see here. Pyramidal says, still, I would vote for AOC if I was forced to. She is better than Trump. Hold on a second. Pyramidal says, everyone says bad things about Eliza Slotkin, but he is the only one standing up to Trump. I don't see people like AOC doing anything. I mean, AOC is arguably doing the most of everybody. Pyramidal. I don't have a list memorized, but she is always on the forefront of leading the charge against the Trump administration. Dear God says, Bondi already replaced by a Zionist loyalist, of course. Are you talking about Todd Blanche, or has somebody else been nominated? Barista Coffee says, talk to you, Prime Minister. Americans don't have prime ministers. Someone says, Democrats aren't pushing eliminating ICE, simply adding cameras. That is inaccurate. If you're looking for the politicians who want to abolish ICE, they are all in the Democratic Party. And even the most milquetoast Democrat is saying that ICE needs to be reined in, that there need to be regulations, someone. Additionally, the reason why we know about the reason why we know about Alex Preddy and Renee Good is because people were filming them. So don't you ever tell me that body cameras are like a milquetoast regulation. Like, without video footage, ICE is able to say whatever the fuck they want about the people that they're murdering. So you can miss me with that cameras aren't enough shit. Like, I agree with you, but cameras aren't nothing. Gigi says, still can't figure out why he gave $40 billion to Argentina. I don't know why he said he did, but I can give you the real reason, Gigi. Samuel Ross says, are you from America? Born and raised. I have lived in California, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and I lived in the UK for a couple of months. Homeless Tommy says, do you support the war with Iran? No, I do not. Benny Bereskowitz says, and still no arrests on the pointless murders. Yes, but I believe that at least one agent is getting charged with homicide. Whoever left that one immigrant like by the side of the road in Buffalo and then they freeze to death. Gigi says, what's the real reason? Okay, so the government of Argentina is libertarian, and the right wing in this country are incentivized to see right-wing authoritarian libertarian countries do well economically to prove that their trickle-down philosophy and libertarian, getting rid of regulations actually works. So we gave them $40 billion so that we could prop up their government. There's also a stupider reason, which is that the leader of Argentina, whose name is Bukele, I believe, he gave Trump a whole bunch of compliments. And so Trump will just do that. If you're right wing and you say nice things to him, he'll just give you a bunch of money. All right, let's see here. Little Purple Footprints says, did Trump admit Iran wasn't an imminent threat during the State of the Union, or is he still lying? I don't know what part of the State of the Union you're referring to, but it's possible. He often says things that are, what do you call it? Says things that are contradictory to what he's doing or other things that he says. All right, Pyramid says, ICE existed before Trump and was not as bad under Democratic leadership. Not as bad, Pyramidal, but it was still pretty bad. Like, it was a rogue agency under Obama, even. User a bunch of numbers says, why did Obama give Iran billions of dollars? Obama did not give Iran billions of dollars. Obama released a bunch of frozen funds that Iran was not able to access. It was their money. Obama just gave it back to them, and he gave it back to them as part of the Iran nuclear deal, which would have kept Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, as opposed to everything that Trump is currently doing. Gabe says, do you hate capitalism? I hate unregulated capitalism. I hate crony capitalism. I think that there's probably some good things about capitalism, but I think that we need to balance it out with like socialism and communism. Grace says, Trump sucks so badly, did every woman is winning her election? Happy to hear that. CS says, why MAGA have the same talking points after being debunked over and over again? That's actually a really good question, CS. What you discover when you delve into the world of sort of like right-wing talking heads and shit like that is that frustrating you and wasting your time is the goal. And so it doesn't matter if you have debunked their talking points 1,000 times. Their goal is to get you to waste your breath talking to a brick wall. And so they say the thing that's already been debunked. You point out that it's been debunked. They say something else that's been debunked. You point out that that's been debunked. Then they go back to the first thing, and you're like, "Are you literally? You're not even listening to me." And then they go, "He, you're triggered, Lib. You're triggered." Okay, let's see here. Grace says MAGA is voting Democrat in Florida. I believe that's accurate. Let's see here. Zothel says MAGA will claim the firing of Pam Bondi is part of draining the swamp. Yeah, but you know, there's not a lot of there. Aduno says, do you think that SCOTUS will end birthright citizenship? I don't think so. They did not seem open to it during arguments, and it looks like Trump was there to like intimidate them to like vote his way, and he left because of how not open to those arguments the Supreme Court was. But just the fact that they are hearing this case as opposed to just striking it down on the merits, I don't know if that's the right language, but just like there's no substance there. Like it's blatantly unconstitutional. And the fact that they are even hearing this case is evidence that the Supreme Court has been captured by right-wing extremists. Jack DK says, which UK party being in power would benefit the US the most? I mean, I think that left-wing parties are generally better, but I'm not sure which one would benefit America the most. All right, Crucifix, great to see you again, says, is the world going to end? I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. You know, we might be talking about like billions and billions of years in the future when the sun gets extinguished. And Crucifix says, these gas prices are killing me. Yeah, I mean, they're hurting everybody. They are causing everything to go up in price because gas is how we get food to the grocery store. Gas is how we get electronics to the store. You know, like everything is going to be more expensive because of that, including gas. All right. Little Purple Footprint says, so he stormed out because they don't want to pass his unconstitutional premise. Yeah, I think you just didn't even like their tone. I think he was there to be like, you better start saying things that make it sound like you're going to vote my way. And then when they didn't, he was like, fuck this, I'm going home. User a whole bunch of numbers says, pretty extreme, wanted to shut down citizenship tourism. Who's trying to do that? User a whole bunch of numbers. Steve Ginkle says, hope Pam Bondi talks. I mean, yeah, it'd be great if she flipped. I think that might be a little bit too much to ask for, but I do think that would be great. All right, welcome everybody. Comments have kind of slowed down a little bit. My name is Jared. I'm here to answer all your questions about politics. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. CS says, are you sure he didn't leave to change his diaper? I mean, according to people that worked on The Apprentice, changing his diaper does not seem to be a priority. What's up, Mia? Great to see you again. Gigi, you're welcome. Pyramid, all right, did those as well. Okay. Let's see here. Harry Newt Zach says, how do I change my voter registration to Democrat? I think it varies state to state, but it should be relatively easy to do if you just Google like change my voter registration and then put what state you're in. Augustinian Alexander says, thoughts on the election results of Tallarico and Crockett from last month? I mean, I think they were both great candidates. I think Tallarico maybe has a little bit of a better shot of winning that Senate seat in Texas. You know, he has this attitude of inclusion and convincing that I don't know if Jasmine Crockett had it. If she does, it certainly wasn't what she was leading with. She was much more of like a firebrand, like I'm gonna stand up to Trump and the Republican Party, and I'm like that's totally valuable also. But I think in this moment, like we probably need a little bit more of what Tallarico's got. But again, they were both great candidates. I don't think that Texas could have gone wrong with either one of them. All right, CS says, do you like the idea of open primaries opposed to making someone register Democrat or Republican? I'm not really sure. I really worry about anything that can kind of like gamify politics more. Like, if it's an open primary, can you vote in the Democratic primary and the Republican Party primary, or do you have to just choose one? Are you willing to sacrifice voting for the candidate that you want so that you can vote for who you think is the weaker candidate on the other side so that the candidate that you want can beat them more easily? Like, I don't like it when stuff like that gets infected in our politics. Like, I don't like people voting for Hillary Clinton in the primary just because they think she has a better chance of beating Trump, even if they like Bernie Sanders better. That's why I advocate for ranked choice voting. Okay. Aduno says, do you think Kamala Harris should run again or not? I do not think that she should run again. She's polling really terribly amongst all of the potential candidates. Obviously, the polls are, they're kind of worthless right now, but I do think it's instructive that most of America isn't sitting here, talking about how Kamala Harris got a raw deal with only having 100 days to mount her campaign. Most people are like blaming her and saying that she did a really shitty job. Gray Cuber says, how do you feel about Pam Bondi being fired? I love it when people in the Trump administration get fired. It usually means we get a worse person, but we get the schadenfreude of getting to watch a shitty person lose their job and be really upset about that. Katie Blade says, is it wrong to think the war is just another way for Trump to manipulate the market like the tariff scam? I think it's wrong to say that that's like the only reason for the war, but I mean, that insider trading and betting on like Polymarket are happening based on decisions that Trump is making militarily because of like all of the extremely sketchy bets that are being happening and all of the sketchy stocks that are being purchased. So we know it's happening, but there are a lot of other motivations, both silly and irresponsible and reckless, like no good reasons, but that is definitely a part of the pie, I think. Harry Newtzak says, how do you convince family members to be Democrat? So I don't think that you should try to convince your family members to be Democrat. I think you should first try to figure out what you agree on and then figure out what you don't agree on and then try to build from there. And then once you get that base level of like, all right, so we can agree that this is good and this is bad, right? Maybe let's take a look at which politicians or which political party is doing the work to do that good thing instead of the thing that we agreed was bad, So yeah, taxing the rich is probably like one of my go-tos where I'm like, we can both agree that the billionaires have too much and we have too little, right? Okay, so what do we think is a good idea for solving that problem? Like, do we think that taxing the rich could do it? Do we think that forcing them to pay us more might do it? Like breaking up monopolies might do it, stuff like that. And then once you figure out, like, all right, so we agree that this is a good way of going forward. All right, let's look at the political party that has done that in the past, has that in their platform going forward, stuff like that. It has to be, not like finger wagging or my data versus your data or I'm going to win this argument. It has to be we are on the same team here. We are both trying to make this country better, but we're in disagreement about how to actually do it. And depending on how far down the right-wing rabbit hole they are, it could be like, you don't even agree what the problems are that are happening. Like, I'm upset that ICE and CBP are kidnapping people and throwing them into fucking torture prisons where they're being murdered, and by many credible reports, they're being SA'd as well. And if you talk to somebody who's like fully red pilled, they'll be like, that's not happening. And then you first have to prove that that's even happening, So, and again, facts and evidence are not the thing that convinces people. It's about engaging and connecting with people. All right, Jay the Gaming says, I read your DM and you are right. People's lives are at risk, but then everyone doesn't agree with demo. I don't know what that means, Jay the Gaming. C Flong, good to see you again. Says, giving the playbook that won me over, slowly sneaking. I don't care for you framing what I'm doing here as sneaky or slowly. Anti-Semitic? Question mark. Sneaky Jews? Question mark. I know you're not. I'm just being silly. Uh, but yeah, man, this is the work. This is the work of convincing. You know, this is the work of bringing people back into a shared reality. Okay, Cacpex, great to see you again. Since it's Trump attacking the Middle East for oil, that is one of many potential motivations. All right, Average Joe says, can I add context to the Argentina bailouts? Two friends of Scott Bessent are heavily invested in Argentina bonds. That's right, I forgot about that. I don't know if you're still here, Gigi, but yeah, people within Trump's circle and a bunch of his billionaire buddies are heavily invested in the economy in Argentina. And so without that bailout of, what was it, 40 billion, $20 billion of American taxpayer dollars, those billionaires were going to make less money on their investments. And so Trump basically gave our tax dollars to Argentina so that his billionaire buddies could get richer. Aduno says, do you think Newsom should be the Democratic nominee? I don't. I don't think that he should be the nominee. I think, there are things about him that seem very electable, like tall, white, handsome, straight, white male, very well spoken, charming. People love all the trolling that he's doing against the Trump administration, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like we're in a moment where people want to vote for somebody like Gavin Newsom, who's taking special effort to walk back any anti the government of Netanyahu comments that he has made. He's definitely not my first choice in the primary. That being said, if he wins the primary and he's the Democratic nominee, then I'm fucking voting for him and advocating for him and volunteering for him. Like, I guarantee you he's going to be better than whatever ding dong the Republican Party puts up. Jay the Gaming says, demo is Democrat. There was a limit. And also there are pro choices. So what to do? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Not everybody agrees. What do we say there? But then everyone doesn't agree with Democrats. Yeah, Jay the Gaming. But what I was referring to in my DM to you was your statement of you sent me a bunch of stuff. I sent you a bunch of data. It did not seem to change your mind or alter your behavior anymore. And instead, you just said, I'm MAGA, turn me into a Democrat, as though this is some sort of a game, yeah, I doing this work, it is important that I recognize when people are not here in good faith. And that really did not seem like, it was in good faith. Nabil says, where would you consider yourself on the spectrum of politics? I'm a progressive Democrat. Doc David says, who's your favorite Democratic candidate for president? So as far as I know, nobody has declared yet. If it was up to the person, the Democrat that I like the best right now is Chris Murphy. And so I would vote for him in the primary if he decides to run. And if he lasts long enough to get to my state in the primary schedule. All right, Doyle Flynn says, thoughts on Ketanji Brown Jackson's comments on citizenship. So I haven't read them, but I did hear people talking about how they're great and they're epic. Everything that she writes is. So yeah, I just have to imagine. I just have to believe that they are. Corporal Fly says, with all this war, maybe we're just trying to quarantine the inevitable collapse. Do you agree, or am I just being a conspiracy theorist? Yeah, I don't think that we should quarantine for the inevitable collapse. I think that things that happen in other countries eventually reach our shores. And so being fully interventionist in that way is eventually going to bite us in the ass. We cut off ourselves from the rest of the world. China establishes dominance over the economy and potentially militarily as well. And then, they eventually come for us. What we're just going to be another North Korea where all of our citizens are starving to death, but the people in the party get to live lives of luxury without any kind of, what do you call it? Without any kind of, Well, I lost my train of thought. Flamingo Mo says, "Did you watch Trump's speech last night?" No, I did not. I do not believe in self-harm. Ko Niep says, "Is capitalism the way forward, or like feudalism, should its end come?" I am sure that there are arguments to be made for including capitalism in your economic structure. I am not prepared to make that argument, though. Here's what I will say. I will say that we have communism in America already in the fact that we have employee-owned companies. We have socialism in America already in that we have paved roads and public education and the fire department and the military all paid for. They're basically social programs, socialist programs, because we pay for them with our tax dollars. So why not have a little more of that communism and a little bit more of that socialism to balance out the capitalism that we have? Because at the moment, capitalism is not working out. Like the fact that you can't afford to buy a house, the fact that you can't afford healthcare, the fact that you can't afford to send your kids to college, the fact that soon there are going to be a lot more people who won't be able to afford food or to put gas in their car, like that is a failure of capitalism. That is capitalism failing. And so I believe that capitalism is better when it has to compete with communism and socialism. It's the reason why, the Nordic countries are doing so good, is because they have a much more balanced model over there. All right, CS says military is very socialist with their benefits. I believe that is accurate. Let's see here. Average Joe. Yeah, I don't know who you're talking to. Are you talking to me? Ecuadorian says, I think a part of me uses politics to avoid thinking about the things I've lost. So I just kind of use politics as a way to avoid everything else. Oh, that makes me really sad, Ecuadorian. I think that you need to have balance in your life. And so if you're focusing too much on politics and you're not taking care of the things that are going on immediately in your life, I think that that's just as bad, maybe worse, than not paying attention to politics at all. But I do hope that you're able to find people that can help you through whatever you're going on, Ecuadorian. Aduno says, what do you think are the reasons that caused Kamala Harris to lose the 2024 election? She only had 100 days. The information environment was being manipulated by the billionaire class to spread narratives to convince people to either not vote or vote for Republicans. There was an incumbency bias where people were just mad at whoever was in charge because prices were going up because of Trump and the Republican Party. Let's see here. Jay the Gaming says, I kind of didn't understand, but sorry, but America is divided. We need to unite it. I agree with that. Buckaroo says, I watched Trump. It was painful. That's what I predicted. Looks like Greek letters says, what do you think of monarchy? I'm against it. Nabil says, why do you believe capitalism is better at competing than socialism? I do not believe that capitalism is better at competing than socialism, Nabil. Cac Peck says, why is ICE so hated now, even though it has existed since before Trump? So it is true that ICE has existed before Trump. It is also true that ICE has done like really, really shitty things under other presidents, under Biden and under Obama. The difference is that, number one, Trump is encouraging ICE and CBP. Like, he is saying that what you are doing is good and you should be doing more of it. And he tripled their funding. So now they are the most well-funded law enforcement organization on the planet. They have a higher budget than like the military of Italy, I believe. So that is enabling them to do more of the atrocities that they were doing under Obama and Biden. Additionally, I forget if I said this already, but Obama and Biden tried to rein in ICE and CBP, but because Trump is enabling them, they're able to do worse things with more impunity. Additionally, because people like Stephen Miller are letting ICE and CBP they're not training them as much anymore. The training has been cut down so that they can try to meet these impossible standards for Stephen Miller's racist deportation regime. They're building concentration camps that they didn't have before, like these massive structures, these torture dungeons for just whatever brown people they happen to round up that day. There is credible reporting that there are rooms in these facilities that are dedicated to SAing their detainees. There is credible reporting that they have murdered people in those detention facilities. So yeah, it's a lot worse now. It is a lot worse now. Yes, that's what I figured, Average Joe. All right, Cflon says, thank you for acknowledging the Stephen Miller problem. Oh yeah, he's the shadow president of America right now. Anton Beret says, what's your opinion on transhumanism? It's like a fun philosophy to think about. I think it's not here yet, so maybe we don't need to maybe we don't need to dive deep into it. Judy Stroyer. I'm also not 100% on what it is, Anton. I got to be honest there. Judy Stroyer says, I survived a forced circumcision when I was 8 hours old. Here in Trump's USA, my body, my choice. So that's inaccurate, Judy. You do not have bodily autonomy in Trump's America, unfortunately. Willie says, why do people say Stephen Miller is the shadow president? So there is a lot of reporting showing that, where independent agencies should be operating by themselves, they are taking their marching orders from Stephen Miller. The same way that Dick Cheney had like a gentleman's agreement with George W. Bush that he was going to be running like all the major shit, and George Bush was going to be out there giving speeches and stuff. I believe, and there's credible reporting to suggest that Stephen Miller has the same relationship with Donald Trump, where Donald Trump can do the things that he wants to do, and he can tweet and go on television and stuff like that. But Stephen Miller gets to give marching orders to ICE and CBP and the FBI and DOJ and FTC, et cetera, et cetera. Dr. Fruit Snack says, what are your thoughts on Kristi Noem's husband's fetish? I'm not here to kink shame, but it always is interesting when people that claim to be these like buttoned up ideals of bucolic Americana, nuclear family, 2.5 children, missionary sex, and then you go to church afterwards to beg Jesus for forgiveness. Like, how many times have we seen that is not the case? With people in that movement, how many times is it somewhere on the spectrum from kinky shit to like fucking crime and PDF activity? Like it's a pretty common occurrence. All right. Kanye Liver says, what career would you do in politics from Canada? I guess I would do whatever job except for president. I think that sounds like a miserable job. Nabil says, do you believe the current parties America can facilitate a socialist movement? I don't believe that the parties themselves are incentivized to do that, but the people can do that. Like, we can vote for politicians who will institute more socialist policies or communist policies in America, but I don't believe that we are in a position right now where the parties are going to do that themselves. I think that there are a lot of people in this country who are very, well-meaning, but are scared of like really big changes that have names like communist and socialism attached to them. But so instead, I think a more incremental approach is smarter, but the faster that we can convince people to do things like universal healthcare or universal basic income or free public college or taxing the wealthy, making billionaires illegal, adding seats to the Supreme Court, et cetera, the faster we can have those changes. But the job is voting, and it's also convincing other people to vote the way that you are. And the job is not being a dick if you are not able to convince enough people to win whatever election, All right, Jay the Game says, do you think democracy is a fundamental thing for America? Yeah, I believe so. It's how we were founded, but there's no rule that will keep America from losing its democracy if we do not do the work of keeping that democracy. Dan Blackwood says, what do you think will happen to birthright citizenship? Just based on vibes, I would say it looks like the Supreme Court is gonna overturn Trump's executive order and keep birthright citizenship. Gorsuch is one of those votes that's like really consistent for protecting Native Americans, which I think is such an interesting character element. Like, this is a guy who votes with the conservative justices 99% of the time, even if it's giving Trump king-like powers, but he's very concerned about Native American populations. Like, I'm glad for it, don't get me wrong, but I'm just like, why is that empathy exist for that thing, but not for the other areas where you have like ruined everybody's lives, Okay, let's see here. Average Joe says, can you think of any other nation's prisons that commit similar acts against an oppressed population? I certainly can, Average Joe. Average Joe also says, you have to watch Kyle Kulinski's response to Noam's husband's big old titties. I don't know who that is, but I'll give it a look. Jacob says, do you think there is a serious chance MAGA will succeed in subverting the elections? There is a chance. The chance will go down the more work that people like you and me do, Jacob. Like, if we do the work of stopping Trump and the Republican Party from subverting the midterm elections and the 28 elections, then they will not succeed. But if we don't do the work, if we just kind of like sit on our hands and are like, oh, this seems like it's going to solve itself, then we are poised to lose our democracy, because Trump and the Republican Party are relentless in their chicanery. You know, like, they are going to do shenanigans to try to lie, cheat, and steal their way into electoral victory. And so we have to be vigilant, and we have to do what we can to stop them. And that means being in touch with our elected representatives. That means voting in such large numbers that the election is too big to rig. Shit like that. Aduno says, do you think the filibuster will be nuked eventually? If yes, which party? If I had to predict, I would say that the filibuster is safe during the Trump administration. There is a growing movement within the Democratic Party to get rid of the filibuster, so maybe we might see it. We might see it either gone or reformed if/when Democrats retake Congress and the White House. But, you know, the same way that there were still a lot of, you know, institutionalists in 2020 who were unwilling to budge even a little bit on filibuster reform, there might be that going forward, which again goes down to my thing about doing the work. If you find the politicians who will get rid of the filibuster and you do the work of electing them, then we can get rid of the filibuster. Cacpeck says, is there something good with Trump? You know, he's 79, so, you know, extrapolate what you think I mean based on that. And he's got a really terrible diet, so there's another clue for you. BitNevo says, if Russia is arming Iran, then why is Trump coordinating with Putin outside of the war? I don't know. The self-own of this is bananas. Like, it feels like he's trying to lose both the war in Iran and also the economic race with China, and also allow Russia to annex other countries, including NATO countries. He's just trying to hurt America as much as possible before he dips and like goes and lives with fucking Snowden in Moscow. Shiv says, do you think the polarization in the U.S. would get any better within the next 20 to 30 years? Yes, Shiv, but we have to do the work of making that happen, though, because what the billionaire class wants is for us all fighting amongst ourselves and going, you're left, you suck, and you're right, and you're a fascist, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Now, that is not to say that there's not a difference between the politicians that these people support. You know, like, I'm not going to disparage any voters, but it is true that the Republican Party is the party of the billionaire class. So what we need to do is not engage in that fighting amongst ourselves, shoot down those narratives, vote for the Democrats so that we can start regulating the billionaire class to take away their ability to spread these narratives that get us fighting amongst ourselves, that increase this divisiveness. Shay May Katie says, do you think Trump opened the door for China to the oil in that region? Yes, I do believe that China is still trading with Iran, and so they're able to they're not going to be as hurt by rising oil costs because they have more access to it. But also, China is printing like a nuclear power plant's worth of solar panels every day. Like, they are in an incredible position to dominate the globe because they will remove themselves from a dependence on fossil fuels before anybody else. And that is going to be a massive advantage in every realm, you know, militarily, economically, you know, what other realms exist. It will be an advantage there. What's up, Ms. Gonna Be All Right? Good to see you again. Cacpeck says, is the USA built of immigrants? Yes. Jay the Game says, any government conspiracy theories that you believe? Here's a government conspiracy theory I believe. I don't think RFK really sounds like that. Aduno says, CNN was bought by a pro-Trump family. Do you think CNN will still be believable in the future? No. Sneezy says, how do we get the right to stop fighting for billionaires? I'm not really sure what you're asking there, Shanzi. Could you clean that up a little bit? Average Joe says Justice Barrist asks Sauer, who's the lawyer arguing for ending birthright citizenship, if children of slaves deserved citizenship since they had neither domicile nor intent to stay. Sauer chose to answer that he didn't know. A yes or a no answer would have been counter to his arguments. Yeah, that's fucking bananas, man. Diane says, can't wait to buy a BYD. Yeah, me too, man. Nabil says, how do you think the Iran war will affect American force projection, petrodollar, and foreign policy? That's a little over my head, Nabil. Yeah, sorry. I would need a little bit more time to connect those dots. Dr. Fruit Snack says, is it wrong to feel like center liberals prevent progressives from entering office? It is not wrong to feel like that, Dr. Fruit Snacks. Like, we have credible reporting on this. Like, we know that people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have been working behind the scenes to try to stop the acceleration of progressive candidates. We know that people in Democratic leadership are not jumping to endorse progressives like Mamdani. But the thing that I get my hackles go up for is when people claim to know the motivations for them doing that. Because there are potential good faith motivations for that, even though I think it's still the stupid wrong thing to do. There are bad faith motivations for that, like they're just trying to protect their own power and make sure that they're still able to do their jobs, make sure that they don't get voted out of office. But, a good faith reason for doing that might be they are worried about Democratic branding, because according to a majority of Americans, the Democratic Party has gone too far to the left. Now, as a progressive, I don't think they've gone far left enough. And I believe that if you really dig into that polling, you will see not evidence that the Democratic Party has gone too far to the left, but that the billionaire class has been very successful at telling Americans that the Democratic Party has gone too far to the left. So if you're Chuck Schumer and it's your job to make sure that Democrats up and down the ballot are still able to get elected, and you see Mamdani or a Plattner coming down the pike, and you're like, holy shit, this is going to be a fucking... This is going to be a feeding frenzy over on Fox News. They're going to fucking lap this up. They're going to have so much more evidence that the Democratic Party has gone full socialist communist unless we nip this in the bud. Now, again, I think that is a stupid sort of like gamesmanship-ness of American politics, but it is certainly borne out in the data. Like, you can make a substantive argument that that's the right move. I don't agree that that's the right move, but you can make that argument. So a lot of times where I see the Democratic Party doing these kind of like underhanded things to undermine more progressive candidates, I'm like, you really shouldn't be doing this. You really, really should not be doing this. But I get why you might be doing this. But the way that we get them to stop doing that is by voting for more progressive candidates. Like, get on the phone and tell your representatives you do not like Hakeem Jeffries being the Democrats' House leader, and say you do not like Chuck Schumer being the Democrats' Senate leader. And then get out there and convince people to vote for the more progressive options in the primary, and then vote for the Democrats in the general. Like, that's how you get the Democratic Party to stop torching progressive candidates, is you make it more politically advantageous for them to not do that. Alrighty, let's see here. Darius Stone says, hello, you're doing like any question about politics? I am, Darius Stone. Okay, Nabil says, how would Americans deal with AIPAC and other capitalist lobbies? Would Americans fight money? I think the best thing that you can do is to vote against candidates that are being funded by those lobbying organizations. And you got to recognize that if you got a Democrat and a Republican who are both being funded by AIPAC, voting for the Democrat is still the better choice. Like, you are not going to get the change that you want by allowing the Republican who's taking AIPAC money to win that election, because every Republican in government gives power to every other Republican in government, and every Democrat in power gives power to every other Democrat in government. Okay, Doc David says, what do you think of the UAP disclosures in Congress? I think it's really interesting. I don't think anything definitive has been released yet, so You know, we can't say for certain what has or has not happened, but it is like interesting that pretty much everybody who has flown missions for the Navy is like, yeah, we see shit all the time that we can't explain, and that looks a lot like, you know, extraterrestrial ships and shit like that. But yeah, I don't think we know anything for certain. What's up, Airstyle? I did enjoy the rocket launch yesterday. I saw videos of it afterwards. Nabil says, should we ban lobbies since it feels like legalized bribery, in my opinion? Yeah, you know, I think a person could make an argument for lobbying organizations being valuable, like a connection between certain industries and the government, experts and the government. It is true, though, that the way that the Republican Party has manipulated lobbying regulations in order to enable and turn it into basically legalized bribery. Like, we need to change those regulations so that we don't have lobbying organizations basically like, you know, purchasing politicians and shit like that. Now, do we have to ban lobbying entirely? I am open to an argument that we should keep some lobbying, but I'm also down for getting rid of it entirely. Okay, Oceanaholic says if birthright citizenship is changed, how will it change? I It's an interesting question, Oceanaholic. Like, I don't really know what the argument that Sauer was making. Like, what is the world that he is imagining? Like, what is the policy he's imagining? Like, I'm not really sure what that looks like. I can tell you that in effect, it will probably be something like the most racist people in Trump's administration will just get to decide who gets to be a citizen and who doesn't get to be a citizen. So, like, you're white, congratulations, you get to stay. You're Christian, congratulations, you get to stay. You vote Republican consistently, congratulations, you get to stay. But oh, you're just some fucking Jewish dude who talks about how great progressive politics and politicians are on the internet 5 days a week. Yeah, you don't get to be an American anymore. Get the fuck out of here. Oceanaholic says, just wondering, my kids have me born here, but not their father. Yeah, I mean, Oceanaholic, I cannot tell you that the law is going to protect you and your family because the Trump administration, ICE, and CBP are acting illegally and unconscionably right now. So I can't tell you that there's nothing to be worried about. You know, this is a very dangerous time for everybody who is not a white Christian Republican in this country. And it's even a little bit dangerous for them right now. Kid says, that's a lie. Can you tell me what you think was a lie? Kid. Kathy says, do you think Pam Bondi will spill it all? I don't know. You know, I would love it if she did, but I don't think that we should hold our breath for that. Buckaroo says, BYDs are popular in Australia. They would be popular here. Kid says everything you just said. So that's not a substantive response, Kid, so you're out of here. Darius Stone says, what arguments would you make against raising the minimum wage and a wealth tax from an economics perspective? Let's see here. If I was going to steel man this, I would say if you raise the minimum wage, you are going to put small businesses out of business, and corporations are just going to raise prices to match the amount of money that they have to spend now paying their employees, which is that all that money is just basically going to go back to the same place. And a wealth tax would be like you inherit your dad's farm, but America wants to tax it to the point where you can't even afford to keep it anymore. You know? Now, all of that is kind of like, you know, it's all specious. Like none of those are good arguments. The reason why corporations would have the ability to raise prices is because the Republican policy of allowing rampant monopolization to occur means that there's no actual free market competition anymore. If we want to legislate minimum wage exceptions for small business, we can and have in the past. Like, we can do things to subsidize small businesses being able to pay their employees an actual living fucking wage. And for the wealth tax, you know, like, yeah, you maybe you have to, I don't know if you have to sell your dad's farm or anything like that. Like, I'm pretty sure there's provisions in wealth tax and estate taxes for people in that situation. But also, like, you know, you didn't work for that. You know, you were handed that. So You know, you get to have a little bit of it, maybe even the majority of it, but you got to give some of it to people who are poor. Otherwise, we all suffer. That's not the most eloquent way that I could have argued that, but I think you probably get my meaning. And my buddy Rob Ryan, great to see you again. Minimum wage without capping the top earners' pay, we may not be solving the problem long term. I generally agree with that, Rob Ryan. Jay Ship says, can we use the military to build houses and infrastructure instead of the private sector? That's an interesting idea. You know, I wonder, because the military already has a job being the military. Instead, like, why don't we have the government hire all of these people who are now out of work because all these fucking massively profitable corporations are doing mass layoffs 24/7. You know, I think we should do the same thing and make a climate corps. Hire a bunch of people who used to work for fucking Oracle or, you know, Meta, who just got fucking laid off, even though the owners are fucking quadrillionaires. Hire them to build houses, to transition the grid to renewable energy, to build better, more robust public transportation, high-speed rail. Like, the Americans are out there waiting to do the work. Like, America can afford to hire them. Jay Ship says, military has a bigger budget. You know, that can change. We can definitely change that. Darius Stone. Oh, First Thunder Politics. Thank you, my guy. Darius Stone says, do you think AI is something new to consider when we think about raising the minimum wage? AI is definitely something we need to consider. I don't think that it has as much to do with minimum wage as it has to do with how many jobs are there going to be available in the future, and how quickly do we need to transition to some sort of universal basic income, or there's going to be a lot of people without jobs, without money, who cannot afford homes, who cannot afford food, and that is a recipe for disaster. All right, everybody, I got a coffee date, so I gotta get out of here. If you like what I do here and you want to support the show financially, you can, but you do not have to. I know that we are all struggling in this cost of living crisis that the Trump administration and the Republican Party have forced upon us. But if you have the dollars and you want to give them to me because you like what I'm doing and you want to support it, then the mechanisms are there. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can become a subscriber on Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free. Costs you $0, helps me out a ton. You can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can just send me money through one of these various mechanisms. Sometimes people ask me for my these things, so I thought I'd put them up there. Iowa Golfer says, struggling so bad, but you can afford to go out for a coffee. Yeah, you know, I'm in a very privileged position, Iowa Golfer, and I have enough empathy to recognize that not every American is where I am. Let's see here. What else? Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, DMs are open. I want you guys to reach out to me. I want to be a resource for you all, to be more informed and more involved in politics. So if there's any way I can do that for you, use me and abuse me. Use me until you use me up. You need me to help you get registered. You need to help you find organizations to volunteer for. Like, that is my whole fucking modus operandi here. You can email me through my website. My DMs are open, or you can hit me up on my Discord. I love the Discord. Link is in the bio. Go join. It's a great community over there. Lots of great information and threads. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea that y'all do the work. You know, don't make predictions about politics. Don't try to read the tea leaves and see what's going to happen in the future. Make the future that you want to happen. Go out there and convince people to vote for the politicians that you like the best. Go out there and volunteer and donate and organize and recruit and boycott and strike and protest. Like, do the work, and we get out of this. And the more people that do the work, the less work that we all individually have to do. All right. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Do some self-care. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye.